Previously, Carolina Sanchez spent her entire life being treated as the disgrace of House Sanchez while living in the shadow of her talented sister, Flora. After being chosen as a political sacrifice, she accepted an arranged marriage with the infamous Bloodthirsty Prince to protect her kingdom. Leaving behind the family she thought never loved her, Carolina finally discovered her father's true feelings before setting off for the Malcosian Empire. Now, standing before the legendary commander of the Pyreborn Knights, she's about to meet the man the entire world fears, Prince Edward Ruby Martinez. Now, as Carolina arrives at the rendezvous point, she finally comes face to face with the man feared across the entire continent, the bloodthirsty Prince Edward Ruby Martinez. Contrary to every terrifying rumor, Edward greets her with unexpected courtesy, assuring her there's no need to apologize before warmly offering a handshake. Surprised to be treated as an equal, Carolina accepts, only to instantly regret it when his overwhelming grip nearly crushes her hand. Realizing what he's done, Edward awkwardly apologizes, admitting he sometimes forgets his own strength, making their first meeting far more amusing than Carolina ever expected. Satisfied with her response, Edward tells Carolina she'll be riding in his carriage. Though surprised, she politely accepts, grateful for his unexpected consideration. Just then, a blonde knight finally breaks the awkward moment by jokingly asking how much longer they plan to keep holding hands. He introduces himself as Teodor Garcia, Edward's right-hand man and the brilliant vice commander of the Pyreborn Knights. Although he wears a friendly smile, Carolina can't help feeling he's quietly judging her, or perhaps wondering if the prince plans to hold her hand all the way to the Empire. With that, Teodor politely guides her to the military carriage, and their journey officially begins. As they travel through the rough mountain roads, the military carriage bounces so violently that Carolina starts feeling motion sick. Noticing her discomfort, Edward immediately opens the window for fresh air and even offers to slow the convoy. His thoughtful gesture catches Carolina completely off guard. The infamous bloodthirsty prince is nothing like the ruthless man she had imagined. After she recovers, Edward even apologizes for not being able to provide a more comfortable carriage, leaving Carolina even more surprised by his kindness. Now that Carolina has recovered, Teodor decides it's time to discuss what comes next. He informs her that their engagement, along with the truth about their marriage, will be officially announced during the Founders' Day fete in just 2 weeks. Before Carolina can even process that, Teodor drops another bombshell. Their wedding is scheduled to take place just 2 weeks after the announcement, leaving them with barely a month to prepare. The news completely catches Carolina off guard, making her wonder if someone like her can really handle everything in such a short time. But after a brief moment of hesitation, she reminds herself that she already promised she would stop running away from her problems. Worrying about failure can wait until after she's given it everything she has. With her resolve renewed, Carolina accepts the plan, admitting she isn't confident but promising to do her absolute best. Pleased by her determination, Teodor smiles and says they'll work hard together. As the sun sets, the Pyreborn Knights make camp for the night. Watching from her carriage, Carolina is greeted by the knight assigned to protect her, who sheepishly apologizes for the rough accommodations. He proudly reveals that he actually argued with his superiors to let her stay at a nearby inn, only to have Teodor reject the idea without a second thought. Carolina can't help but smile at his sincerity and asks for his name. The poor knight instantly lights up, introducing himself as Khalid with so much excitement you'd think he'd just been promoted instead of simply answering a question. Before the conversation can continue, a scout suddenly rushes into camp with an urgent warning. Bandits have been spotted nearby. In an instant, the peaceful campsite erupts into chaos as every knight grabs their weapon and races into position. Before joining the fight, Khalid quickly tells Carolina to stay low inside the carriage, then charges into battle. The Pyreborn Knights effortlessly repel the first wave of arrows with magic and launch a fierce counterattack. But just when victory seems certain, a stray arrow crashes into Carolina's carriage. Moments later, flames engulf it, trapping her inside. Believing there's no escape, Carolina quietly accepts what she thinks are her final moments, with only one regret left in her heart, that she never got the chance to repay her father. She closes her eyes, convinced her journey is about to end. Just as Carolina gives up all hope, the carriage door is kicked open with incredible force. Standing in the flames is none other than Edward. Calmly reaching out his hand, he tells her he can't let his bride give up so easily. Still in shock, Carolina grabs his hand as Edward carries her safely out of the burning carriage. Once outside, he apologizes, awkwardly admitting that the fire was actually caused by his own magic while protecting her. After making sure she's unharmed, Edward tells Carolina to stay somewhere safe while he deals with the remaining enemies. But before he can leave, a knight rushes over with a panicked expression. Khalid has been critically wounded. The scene then shifts to the medical tent, where Khalid is barely clinging to life. Despite the healers pouring powerful magic into his wounds, the bleeding refuses to stop. Realizing the situation is critical, Edward orders the others to keep Khalid alive while he rushes off to bring Theodore, believing he's their only hope. Before leaving, he gently asks Carolina to remain inside the protected tent, insisting she's too young to witness something so tragic. But Carolina refuses to look away. If she can't save Khalid herself, she at least wants to stay by his side until the end. Moved by her resolve, Edward quietly leaves. The moment he's gone, Carolina falls to her knees and desperately prays for Khalid's life. Suddenly, a brilliant holy light bursts from her body, flooding the entire tent. The healers freeze in disbelief as Khalid's seemingly fatal wounds begin closing before their eyes. Even the court mage is left speechless. His healing magic should never have been capable of curing injuries that severe. When Edward returns with Theodore, both are left speechless to find Khalid's condition improving far faster than anyone thought possible. The healers explain that the moment Carolina began praying, his life-threatening wounds suddenly started healing on their own. Embarrassed, Carolina quickly denies having anything to do with the miracle, insisting she doesn't possess any magic and was declared completely talentless as a child. Her answer only deepens the mystery, leaving Edward and the others wondering what truly happened. Later that night, Carolina quietly stands alone outside the camp, lost in thought, when Edward approaches her. He sincerely thanks her for staying by Khalid's side instead of turning away, then admits he had completely misjudged her, believing she was just a pampered duke's daughter. He never expected her to face such a horrific scene without running away. Hearing someone acknowledge her strength for the first time leaves Carolina deeply moved. Realizing she had also misunderstood Edward, she warmly accepts his apology and gently reminds him that a prince shouldn't bow so easily. Flustered, Edward awkwardly agrees, joking that she's starting to sound just like Theodore. Meanwhile, Edward returns to check on Khalid, only to learn that although his condition has stabilized, he's lost too much blood to continue riding on horseback. Deciding Khalid should travel in the carriage instead, Edward believes the problem is solved. However, Theodore quickly points out that leaving Carolina alone in the same carriage as another man would be highly inappropriate. Caught off guard, Edward awkwardly blurts out that he'll simply ride with them instead, much to Theodore's disbelief. Theodore quickly reminds Edward that his plan won't work because the only large carriage was the one Edward accidentally burned to ashes. Embarrassed, Edward admits he still feels guilty but explains that, for some reason, an overwhelming surge of power caused him to lose control of his magic during the battle. To his surprise, Theodore reveals he wasn't the only one. Several knights experienced the same strange phenomenon, and whatever healed Khalid seems to be connected to it as well. Deciding the mystery can wait until later, Theodore brings the conversation back to the transportation problem. After thinking for a moment, Edward calmly declares that Carolina will simply ride with him on horseback, leaving Theodore completely stunned by the unexpected solution. The next morning, with the carriage no longer available, Carolina travels on horseback with Edward. Concerned for her comfort, Edward repeatedly checks if the ride is too rough and even offers to slow the horse down. Touched by his thoughtfulness, Carolina assures him she's doing just fine. As the two continue their journey, the border finally comes into view. Looking ahead, Carolina quietly realizes she's about to step into a completely new chapter of her life, the Malcosian Empire. Before long, they cross the border and arrive in the imperial capital of Malcosias. By then, Khalid has recovered enough to travel, allowing Carolina and Edward to continue the rest of the journey by carriage. As they near the palace, Carolina remarks that the trip somehow felt both long and surprisingly short. Smiling, Edward casually suggests they travel together again someday. Assuming he's only being polite, Carolina happily agrees, but to her surprise, Edward sincerely says he'd love nothing more than to see the world with her again. Watching the two innocently promise future trips, even Theodore can't help wondering what kind of conversation he's witnessing before clearing his throat and reminding them that the Emperor and Empress are already waiting for Carolina's arrival. Soon, Carolina accompanies Edward into the imperial palace for an audience with Emperor Eric and Empress Vanessa. Standing before the Empire's legendary rulers, she can't help but feel overwhelmed. Emperor Eric is celebrated as the mighty Lightning Emperor, while Empress Vanessa is revered across the continent as the legendary Frost Witch. Faced with two living legends, Carolina grows so nervous that even her stomach begins to ache. Sensing her anxiety, Edward quietly reassures her with a simple, "You'll be fine." Those few words calm her enough to introduce herself with confidence. Instead of the cold reception she expected, the Emperor warmly welcomes her to the Empire and, to Carolina's surprise, immediately invites her to join the royal family for lunch so they can get to know their future daughter-in-law. The next scene is almost comical. Carolina finds herself surrounded by the entire imperial family, all quietly staring at her as if she were the main course instead of the lunch. The overwhelming attention makes her so nervous that she barely touches her food. Noticing this, Empress Vanessa gently asks whether the meal isn't to her liking. Panicking, Carolina hurriedly claims she's simply too full from breakfast, only for Edward to innocently expose her by pointing out that she actually ate less than usual that morning. With her excuse falling apart instantly, Carolina can only sit there in complete embarrassment, wishing the ground would swallow her whole. Seeing Carolina's uneasy expression, Vanessa gently encourages her to speak honestly if anything is bothering her. She even offers to move the meal indoors if Carolina isn't comfortable dining on the terrace, adding that if the problem is with them, they'll gladly do everything they can to make things right. Edward quickly agrees, assuring Carolina that she doesn't need to hide her feelings, while Emperor Eric warmly reminds her that she's about to become a member of their family, so there's no reason to hold anything back. Hearing those words, Carolina is left speechless. She can't believe they're already treating her like family, making her realize she'd been worrying for nothing. Feeling embarrassed, she apologizes and admits that the only reason she seemed uncomfortable was because she was nervous having all three of them looking at her at once. Curious, Edward asks if his parents were really staring at Carolina the whole time. Without hesitation, the Emperor proudly admits it, explaining he's simply excited to meet the daughter he'll soon welcome into the family. Vanessa happily agrees, saying that after raising only sons, she's always dreamed of having a daughter. She then admires Carolina's ruby red eyes, prompting the Emperor to explain that rubies are a cherished symbol of the imperial bloodline. Delighted by the coincidence, Vanessa immediately declares that Carolina's wedding ring simply has to be a ruby, leaving the embarrassed bride-to-be blushing as the royal family bursts into laughter. Afterward, Theodore escorts Carolina to the room prepared for her inside the palace. Before leaving, he introduces two people who'll be by her side from now on: her personal maid, Marissa, and her cheerful bodyguard, Owen, a knight of the Pyreborn Order personally assigned by Edward to protect her. After welcoming Carolina, Theodore informs her that starting tomorrow, her royal training officially begins, marking the first step toward becoming the Empire's future princess. The following day, Carolina begins her royal lessons, only to discover that her etiquette instructor is none other than Empress Vanessa herself, who personally volunteered to teach her. After hours of intense training, Carolina is completely exhausted, but Vanessa is nothing but impressed. To Carolina's disbelief, the Empress praises her as a fast learner with an excellent memory and, above all, an eagerness to improve. For someone who spent her entire life being called the disgrace of House Sanchez, hearing those words is almost impossible to believe. From then on, Carolina throws herself into one lesson after another, with Theodore handling the academic subjects while dance lessons prepare her for life as a member of the imperial family. The next day, Carolina heads to another lesson, only to be casually informed by Theodore that Edward will be joining today's class. Thinking he hasn't arrived yet, she confidently agrees, then immediately spots him sitting right beside the instructor, leaving her completely flustered. Edward awkwardly apologizes for not telling her in advance and invites her to sit down before the lesson begins. This time, Theodore's lecture focuses on magic. After learning that Carolina was declared talentless from a single aptitude test as a child, he reveals that this common belief is actually a misconception. In the Malcosian Empire, everyone is tested twice because magical power can change dramatically while growing up. Hearing that a second test could reveal abilities she never knew she had, Carolina is filled with hope for the first time. Theodore advises her to undergo another aptitude test after the Founders' Day festival and the wedding, leaving Carolina eager to discover the truth. Before ending the lesson, Theodore can't resist teasing Edward for accidentally burning an entire carriage during the bandit attack. Edward quickly defends himself, insisting some mysterious force caused him to lose control of his magic. Theodore admits the cause is still unknown, adding that the complete absence of monsters during their journey is just as strange. Confused, Carolina casually mentions that she's never seen a wild monster in the kingdom of Celestia. Her answer leaves both Edward and Theodore speechless. To them, a land completely free of monsters is almost unimaginable. Theodore eventually concludes that the kingdom's saints must have protected the land so thoroughly that monsters have virtually disappeared before steering the discussion back to their magic lesson. After class, Owen escorts Carolina back through the palace and casually reveals that Edward has always hated studying, joking that seeing the prince attend a lecture is rarer than spotting a shooting star. He even comes up with a ridiculous theory that Edward must have cheated on an exam years ago and is only now being forced by Theodore to retake his lessons. Before Owen can continue his wild imagination, a familiar voice cuts him off. Scarlet now fully recovered. Carolina is delighted to see him back on his feet and asks how he's doing. With his usual cheerful smile, Khaled assures her he's completely fine, joking that after resting for so long, he almost feels guilty for taking a break. Relieved to hear that Khaled has recovered, Carolina smiles as the two knights immediately start bickering. Khaled scolds Owen for joking about the prince, warning that remarks like those could be considered treason, while Owen brushes him off, arguing that the Pyreborn Knights already have such a terrible reputation that a few more jokes won't make any difference. But before either of them can get the last word, Owen suddenly senses danger. In an instant, he throws up a magical barrier just as a bullet comes flying straight toward Carolina. Reacting without a moment's hesitation, Collet dives forward and pulls Carolina behind cover, desperately asking if she's been hurt. But the terrifying assassination attempt leaves Carolina completely frozen. Unable to answer, she simply trembles in shock as tears stream down her face, still struggling to process how close she came to losing her life.